There is tough competition between Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo in the console world. In fact, the companies have been in a console war for decades. But who's winning the war? Is it Microsoft with its Xbox, or is it Sony with its PlayStation? Well, let's find out how it all started. The console war actually started between Sega and Nintendo, and Sega had been outperforming its rival in 1993. Also, back in the early 1990s, Sony decided to partner with Nintendo to create a CD-ROM peripheral. However, the venture failed and Sony decided to build the PlayStation. Sony introduced the PlayStation in December 1994, and Sega tried to beat it with its Saturn consoles. Well, Sony won the war by offering more affordable consoles. While the Saturn was priced at $399, Sony offered its PlayStation console at $299. Sega had heavily invested its money on Saturn, and Sony's competition hit the company's finances really hard. At the same time, Nintendo rolled out the Nintendo 64. Since Sony was capturing the market quickly, the console war between Nintendo and Sega vanished. Both companies were now facing Sony as their primary rival, and Sony was performing very well. The PlayStation 2 was so successful that it is still the best-selling home console of all time. After the launch of the PS2, Sega was forced to leave the home console hardware business. But first, let's discuss the end of Nintendo dominance. Nintendo had become a dominant player in the console realm because of its Nintendo Entertainment System, and when it launched the successor of NES, the SNES, it became even more powerful. At that time, the Super Mario series was a massive hit, and sequels were being released one after the other. But as I mentioned earlier, the release of Sony PS was a nightmare for Nintendo and Sega. And by the mid-1990s, Sony had already dominated the Europe market, but the Nintendo 64 was an American favorite. It sold approximately 33 million units. However, Sony was clearly the winner since it sold 102 million units of PS. Nintendo then released the GameCube, while Sony rolled out the PS2. And we already know that PS2 is the best-selling console of all time. Also, before Sony released it, Microsoft had stepped in with its Xbox console. Now, the war was between the three companies. However, Sony and Microsoft were more dominant players in the market as compared to Nintendo. Sony versus Microsoft. These two companies have been releasing new models within a year of each other since 2000. Here, it is important to note that the console hardware doesn't have distinct technical advantages, and the companies primarily focus on creating a unique console environment. During the time of PS3, Sony struggled on the technical side, while Microsoft achieved some success with Xbox 360. However, Xbox 360 had some heating issues, and Sony was able to keep its throne with the PS3. Microsoft didn't give up and made a comeback by fixing the heating issues. But what was Nintendo doing at that time? Well, it had admitted the fact that Nintendo was a fan favorite and niche-specific. The company had already lost its appeal to the mainstream and soon made the decision to announce Wii, a fun console for the entire family. This console was too light for enthusiastic games that favored the better graphics and mechanically stronger games of PlayStation and Xbox. Fast forward to 2021. By 2021, Nintendo had made changes in its strategy and came up with the Switch for hardcore gamers. One of the best things about the Nintendo Switch is that it is portable and not so strong with regards to muscle as compared to other consoles. Moreover, the company started focusing on making kid-appropriate games instead of fighting over the console exclusivity rights to massive hits like Call of Duty. You might also want to note that since Nintendo adopted the well-known Blue Ocean approach, it stopped directly competing with Microsoft and Sony. The company made the right decision to find the middle ground between enthusiastic gamers and fans of the so-called Nintendo magic. Comparing the numbers from 2022, a report by GoNintendo.com published in 2022 revealed that the global console market declined by 7.8% because of the lack of availability of PS5 and Xbox Series X consoles. Moreover, a number of major game releases were delayed into 2023. Now, the data also suggests that Sony is still a dominant player with a 45% global market share, with Microsoft capturing 27.3% of the total market share. Well, Microsoft was able to grow from 25.5% primarily because of its dual product strategy with the Xbox Series devices. Some experts also believe that the company was able to grow its sales because of the supply chain challenges that Sony faced. But with the increasing availability of PS5 in 2023, it seems like the sales gap between PlayStation and Xbox will widen. Microsoft recently admitted that it lost the war. You have probably heard that Microsoft is trying to acquire Activision Blizzard. Well, it is facing a tough challenge from Nintendo's Switch and PS5 and trying to conquer the gaming market with other strategies. The interesting thing to note here is that Microsoft submitted some documents to the court during its battle with the FTC over the acquisition of Activision Blizzard. One section of this document states, Xbox console has consistently ranked third of three behind PlayStation and Nintendo in sales. In 2021, Xbox had a share of 16%. The document also states that the company is betting on a different strategy to make a comeback. The company now wants to focus on earning revenue by selling games instead of consoles. Phil Spencer, who is the head of Xbox, recently appeared on the podcast Kinda Funny Games. During this podcast interview, he said, "I know that will upset a ton of people, but it's just the truth of the matter. When you're third place in the console marketplace and the top two players are as strong as they are, we lost the worst generation to lose in the Xbox One generation, where everybody built their digital library of games." What is happening in 2023? Although Microsoft is trying to acquire Activision Blizzard and shift its focus from selling consoles, Xbox One and the XS series are still the perfect consoles if you are someone who is budget conscious. Moreover, the company is trying to build an ecosystem. And what's Sony doing right now? Well, the PlayStation maker is continuing to release highly polished games and selling them to premium customers. All in all, I would say that time has provided a balance between all three companies. Sony is undoubtedly the king of the console realm, while Microsoft is shifting its focus on moving toward a physical consoleless ecosystem. Now, let me tell you about some data from Statista. In April of this year, the PS5 remained the best-selling console in the world. 1.35 million units of PS5 were sold during the measured time, while Nintendo sold 1.25 million units of the Switch. Data from Statista also suggests that these three gaming giants earned a total of $52.6 billion in gaming revenue in 2022. Having said that, we can surely say that Nintendo officially exited the console war, but we can still compare the sales of the Nintendo Switch to the Sony PS5 and Microsoft Xbox Series XS. And while it previously appeared that Microsoft would probably exit the console war, some analysts started to believe that the potential for escalation in the war has grown because of Microsoft's plan to acquire Activision Blizzard. Sony was concerned over Microsoft's potential ownership of the COD series. However, Microsoft was forced to give a written commitment to Sony that it will keep the highly successful gaming series on the PlayStation consoles for at least 10 years. But acquiring Activision Blizzard will still give an edge to Microsoft, and it might start dominating Sony. But these are just speculations. Only time will tell what happens next. So what do you think? And which is your favorite gaming console? Are you a fan of PlayStation or Xbox or the Nintendo Switch? Don't forget to share your thoughts with us in the comments section below. And if you want to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon to never miss any updates. Until next time, take care and stay tuned.